So the Alberta Native Trout Collaborative was formed in 2019, and we consist of a group of partner organizations working to advance native trout recovery in Alberta. Our members include Freshwater Conservation Canada, Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, or CPAWS, the Southern Alberta chapter, Cows and Fish, Alberta Environment and Protected Areas, FRI Research, and Alberta Conservation Association. But we have also worked closely with various organizations like the Bow Habitat Station as well. The goals of the collaborative were to coordinate resources to mitigate threats and promote the recovery of Alberta's threatened native trout through habitat restoration, recovery stocking, land use planning, and watershed and fish population assessments. We have also worked together to help educate, engage, and inspire all Albertans to take pride in our native trout and to take action to help care for their habitats. So we received funding through the Canada Nature Fund for Aquatic Species at Risk from Fisheries and Oceans Canada. It has funded many of our projects and outreach initiatives that were focused on restoring native trout populations and the habitats, as you can see from all of our photos above. Unfortunately, as of March 2026, this funding is ending and the Native Trout Collaborative is dissolving. Regardless of this, all Native Trout Collaborative members will continue to commit to protecting our native trout in Alberta. And we hope that everyone here will also join us in this mission to continue to support our members. So in Alberta, we have 3 species of native trout that are at risk. They include the bull trout, West Slope cutthroat trout, and the Athabasca rainbow trout. All these species are listed as threatened under the Alberta Wildlife Act, and the bull trout and West Slope cutthroat trout are listed as threatened as well under the Species at Risk Act in Canada, with the Athabasca rainbow trout listed as endangered in Canada.
All right, so now we're going to have a quick look at these maps. These are Fish Sustainability Index maps. They were developed by the Government of Alberta in 2018 and 2019, and it compares the historical and current densities of adult trout in the province. So this first one that we're looking at is the bull trout. On the left, we have the historical density, and on the right, we have the current density. So on the left, we can see that their populations used to be doing quite well. All of the green, the light and the dark green indicate very high adult densities, with a slightly less density to the east. So we do have some moderate, low, and very low areas on that left-hand map. And then when we look at the current density, we have no areas that are considered to be very high in adult densities. And as we move to the east, we have lots of very low and low regions. Next, we're going to look at the West Slope cutthroat trout map. So again, kind of the same thing. On the historical side, we have a lot of dark green, a very high, and moderate populations. On the right-hand map, we actually see a lot of the gray. So this is these are populations that are considered to be functionally extirpated. So what this means is that they're no longer present, or the population is so low that it can no longer sustain itself. The West Slope cutthroat trout is being constrained to the headwaters in the west, as you can see on that right-hand map. And the areas where they are, we have low and very low densities in those areas. Last but not least, we have the Athabasca rainbow trout. So the Athabasca rainbow trout are only found in the Athabasca Basin, which is why they're only a little section of that map. All other rainbow trout populations in Alberta are actually not native and were introduced in the past. When these maps were released in 2019, there were no areas that were considered to be functionally extirpated, that gray color, although this may no longer be the case. With these maps, we can see that there is a lot of very low areas, and again, slightly better, but as we move westward, we have low densities. So the reason for the native trout decline in Alberta is due to cumulative effects. So cumulative effects means that there isn't a single reason why the native trout in Alberta, why their populations are facing decline. So current and past impacts from both human and natural activities have contributed to the state of their populations now. Some of these impacts include habitat loss and changing water quality and temperature. Additionally, industrial activities and development in native trout habitat and climate change are continued stressors that are putting them at risk. So it's a whole bunch of stuff coming together that is causing their decline. Something that is particularly of concern is hybridization. So this is particularly a concern for Westlobe cutthroat trout and Athabasca rainbow trout. Hybridization is what happens when two different species reproduce and they have hybridized offspring. So the reason that hybridization is a big concern is because hybridization will dilute the beneficial genes that our native trout have developed over thousands of years. So Westlobe cutthroat trout and Athabasca rainbow trout are reproducing with non-native rainbow trout, and that is a pretty big concern for their populations. Another reason why this is a big concern is because populations that are deemed to be less than 95% pure are no longer protected under provincial and federal acts, the ones that we previously mentioned, the Wildlife Act and the Species at Risk Act. So this isn't just a concern for the Athabasca rainbow trout and the Westlobe cutthroat trout. Bull trouts also do hybridize with non-native brook trouts. Awesome. All right, so that's your little intro to what the Native Trout Collaborative is all about. So I'll just go over the schedule for the evening. So we're gonna have two presentations right away here. We're gonna have Ben Kissinger from FRI Research and Kenton Newfield from Alberta Environment and Protected Areas. So we're gonna have those two presentations. Each of them are gonna be followed by a 5-minute question period. For those of you that are watching online, please drop your questions in the chat using the Q&A function. After our first two presentations, we're gonna have a 10-minute break. So if you need to use the washrooms, they're located behind one of these white doors on either side of me. And if you walk to the left, you will reach them eventually. This is a very long hallway behind me, or ahead, in front of me. We also have some snacks on this side of the room as well. And then after, oh, I messed something up. Yeah. Okay. So after the 10-minute break, we'll come back together and we'll have our last three presentations from Deanna Del Valle, Noreen Ambrose, and Sherry Tarrington from Freshwater Conservation Canada, Cows and Fish, and CPAWS. And then after the presentations, stick around for a couple minutes. We will do the draw prize about 5-10 minutes after we finish the presentations. So stick around. You have to be present in order to win your prize. So without any further delay, we're going to get right into it with our first presentation, which will be Ben Kissinger from the FRI Research, who will be presenting on temperature and translocations, developing tools for native trout recovery efforts. Yeah.
All right, hello all. Thanks for attending and thanks to the collaborative for putting together this presentation. A lot of the topics that I'm going to be touching on were discussed earlier, so I might breeze through a few things regarding the background on the species that we're interested in today. The work that we do is within Treaties 6, 7, and 8 along the eastern slopes, all the way from the US border to the border with BC. Which is home to many First Nations as well as the Métis Nation of Alberta. And you'll see throughout my talk collaborations that we have with communities throughout, as well as a ton of collaborations. So we saw these maps earlier. Basically, the story is our 3 native trout species are not doing well, and that's why they're federally listed. The reason they're not doing well is a variety of factors, which we call cumulative effects. And one of those cumulative effects is potential warming or climate change. And so to keep it simple, I'm just going to look at bull trout because they span the entire eastern slopes. And so as I talk today, it'll be through the lens of bull trout. And so for fish, their body temperature is regulated by the water surrounding them. They're called ectotherms. And so the temperature influences how they convert food into muscle or gonads for reproduction. And so for a cold water species, they're highly influenced by where on the landscape they can live based on the temperature of the environment. Temperature is influenced by a lot of factors everywhere, including precipitation, solar radiation, wind effect, the amount of riparian shading. In Alberta, we have glaciers and a lot of snow melt that feed in. Groundwater is super important, especially for spawning habitat, which these cold water species rely on. And because it's variable, we need to collect temperature using these small hobo tidbit loggers. They're about the size of a toonie, and we put them in the stream and they collect temperature on an hourly basis. So here we have a figure that shows the dates on the x-axis and then temperature on the y. And we have 2 different streams here, one that's blue and is cooler and one that is red and is hotter. And we have temperature measurements every hour, and we can see the warmer stream stays higher than the blue one. And if we think about a species like bull trout, experiments have been done that have shown that they grow the best in temperatures between approximately 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. So if we overlay that on here and say that's the optimal area for a bull trout to exist, we see that the red stream exceeds those temperatures on a regular basis, whereas the blue stream is either within or below. So if I had to put my money on what stream we might find a bull trout in, I'd put it on the blue stream. So this type of information is really useful for managers, but the problem is we only put these in select locations on the landscape, so you need to do modeling to be able to account for the differences in between sites. And so to do this, we went from approximately 700 locations in 2023 and through contracts, some of which are with the organizations here like FCC and all these organizations on the side. We deployed more temperature loggers. And then the best way to get data was just to talk to people, because so many people, so many WPACs, government agencies have been collecting this data and just haven't done anything with it at a large spatial scale. And so all these red points here are actually data that was collected by other agencies that was entered into the database. And so in the last couple of years, we've filled in the gaps on the map. And by this past summer, we've pretty much covered the entire eastern slopes with data. You see some sparse areas in and around the national parks, and that's mainly because you need helicopters to get in there. We prioritized areas that were ground accessible. So to date, we went from 700 unique locations to 3,000. Some of these locations have up to 30 years worth of data, so we can get at some temporal aspects of what's happening in the water. And we have over 110 million temperature measurements up and down eastern slopes. So when we get this data, we can then create these maps that basically describe what water temperature is every 500 meters along a river network. So this river here is the Beaver Lodge River. It's actually up near Grand Prairie. And the blue circles are where our logger locations are, and then all the warm and cool colors are temperature predictions. And so the map on the left-hand side is all temperatures between 0 degrees Celsius and 22. And so you can see the main stem of the river is a lighter yellow color, so it's warmer. And then as you get into the headwaters, it cools down. What we can say is, what if we remove all the temperatures that are greater than 15 degrees Celsius? How many tributaries are remaining on the map? And we see in this particular watershed, very few locations are left remaining that would be cool enough in the month of August for bull trout to exist. And when we look at this watershed in general, we don't see bull trout in there frequently. And actually, Arctic grayling have been extirpated from this watershed, and it used to be one of the ones that they're most abundant in. So that just showcases how you can use this tool to make management decisions. And so when we think about fish, and you can't see because the sun's kind of blocking it, but there's a waterfall barrier here. Fish might be downstream, and the water's nice and cool and functional, but with changes in competition with non-native species like brook trout, potentially whirling disease, angler pressure, cows, and then warming temperatures, this downstream habitat might not be functional for these fish anymore. So the concept of potentially moving fish above barriers as a refuge is something that others are going to talk about today, and this water temperature data helps feed into that to understand, is this water up here going to be cool enough for them to complete life processes, and is down here gotten too warm? And so at this point, I'm going to do a video because that's much nicer than talking. And this is a collaborative project that was done by a bunch of members in here and a past master's student of mine, looking at potentially moving fish with these small incubation chambers into novel locations. Here, all the work was done in Smith-Dorian Creek. And so this is an area where bull trout spawn and are known to spawn in the Kananaskis area, but this could be used in other locations potentially sometime in the future. So if you just scroll down, and if you ever want to learn more about what FRI does, we have a lovely website with a bunch of projects for the water and fish program.
Where scrolling is easier said than done. Let me scroll first, and then I'll move it over there. Okay.
Should be
The top one? All right, scroll, complete. Moving initiated. Okay, we're gonna full screen it.
And I don't have an acknowledgement slide, but it should be captured at the end of this. So.
How many hit play?
Thank you.
Should I hit it?
Hit it.
Hey everyone, Michael Short here. Come on, let's go outdoors. Well, welcome to the Kananaskis area where an interesting study is taking place looking at bull trout and whether or not bull trout eggs can be transplanted into streams like this. Of course, there have been many challenges facing bull trout here in Alberta.
So bull trout are Alberta's provincial fish, and they're kind of like the grizzly bears of our mountain and foothill rivers. They're often the top predator on the food chain. They can get to very large sizes, and they have silvery missile-shaped bodies with pale spots on the side. In their spawning season, they develop bright white leading edges on their fins, and the males grow big hooked lower jaws called a kite, very similar to a salmon that you'd see on the coast. Unfortunately, many populations of bull trout across the province aren't doing very well right now, and depending on where you are, it could be a combination of one or many things. In some cases, it's habitat degradation, in others, it's overfishing, and maybe even competition and hybridization with stocked, non-native eastern brook trout. So really, the right recipe for recovery really depends on what population that we're hoping to recover. Recovery stocking is different than recreational stocking that most people are familiar with. Recreational stocking is done to create a fishery for people to enjoy, whereas recovery stocking is done to conserve a species and in some cases even bring it back from the brink of extinction. Here in Alberta, we typically do recovery stocking to address a couple key threats: climate change and competition and hybridization with stocked eastern brook trout.
Partnerships play a crucial role in the success of a bull trout recovery program. Over the next few days, fishery biologists from EPA will be collaborating with counterparts from DFO, the University of Calgary, the Alberta Conservation Association, and FRI Research, which are one of the collaborators for Native Trout Recovery Program.
Partnerships and volunteers are absolutely critical to native trout recovery. The problems that we need to address to recover native trout are far too complex for us to do by ourselves. And there are many different ways that people can get involved in improving the lives of native trout. And it could be as simple as, if you're an angler, make sure you're handling those fish properly. Or if you want to get your hands dirty, check out our partner websites, Trout Unlimited Canada or Cows and Fish, and come out for a day and help plant willows and make habitat even better.
Bull trout swim up this creek to spawn, which allows biologists to use electrofishing to catch enough males and females. Once caught, the fish are held in a netted off area in a deep pool.
So the idea here is that folks are wearing electropat, going along the banks and just bringing out these monster bull trout. I've never seen anything like it, and I've been fishing for, I don't know, an awful lot of years here in Alberta, but this is simply amazing to see.
One of the contributing factors to the growth of this population of bull trout is the angling restrictions introduced in the 90s. Since then, the government of Alberta and organizations like the Alberta Conservation Association have been keeping tabs on this critical spawning creek.
Yeah, so ACA has some history out here. So we supported a project on the population estimates work done in the Upper Kananaskis bull trout population, late 90s, early 2000s. So with the closure out here, it's really just nice to see the amount and the healthy size of the fish that we were seeing the last couple days.
After collecting a number of bull trout, the next step is to harvest the eggs from the females and the milt from the males. However, biologists need to ensure that the females are ready to lay their eggs before this process can take place.
So there's beautiful eggs.
Yes.
Look at the size of these.
Yeah.
Wow. All the way back. Yep.
That's a good one.
And just how many eggs will a single female bull trout lay?
Well, you really put me on the spot here, Michael, but I would estimate around 2,400 eggs per female on the higher side.
And when it comes to the milk needed to fertilize the eggs, one has to ask, is it the volume or the potency that biologists are looking for?
That's a tremendous question. Visually, you can ascertain on the milt sort of the potency. If it's a really solid white, you might put in less. Other stuff was pretty watery, so we were able to use probably about a cc from each male for the fertilization. Too much milk is no good. It'll actually choke the microfile and allow for poor fertilization. And if you don't have enough, there's just not enough sperm to actually swim to each egg. So it's kind of a fine line, more of a learn as you go and from just historical knowledge.
In order to ensure genetic diversity, the milk from 4 male bull trout is being used to fertilize these eggs.
And if we did have one male with poor milt, we can ensure fertilization to the other 3. A little more, Lindsay, a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more. Keep going, keep going, keep going. A little faster, a little faster. There you go.
One other question that remains to be answered from this study is whether or not biologists can successfully plant bull trout eggs into suitable spawning locations.
So we're taking these eggs and going to put them in little capsules and be burying those capsules back in the stream to then see the survival rates over winter. So we'll pick them back up in the spring and see how many fish have survived. And this should give us a good idea of if this can be an effective method for conservation translocations. So obviously translocations aren't a universal solution, but we can use those in locations where the population's already extirpated
So the first step today is a fisheries biologist is going to dig a hole about 20 or 30 centimeters deep, and that mimics exactly what that big female bull trout is going to do. Next step is we measure and make sure that we've achieved that right depth, and then we carefully drop the egg capsule into stream, and it looks a little bit like a hockey puck. Inside that egg capsule, there's 50 fertilized bull trout eggs and some gravel, just to protect the eggs and make sure they stay well oxygenated throughout the winter time. Afterwards, a biologist will just gently cover that egg capsule with gravels once more. And again, this is exactly what would happen in nature with one of those big bull trout. So in 5 to 6 months, we'll be returning to site, digging up those egg capsules, and seeing just how many eggs survive throughout the winter time. And that's going to be the critical learning that we need to go forward and use this technique in other places across the East Slopes.
Biologists must learn how to identify the best spots in the stream for planting bull trout eggs. These fish can detect areas where groundwater seeps in, providing ideal conditions for incubating eggs. But factors such as substrate size, water depth, and temperature may all be crucial environmental conditions that must be evaluated. For this study, over 100 of these pucks will be planted into the stream bed at various locations. Department of Fisheries and Oceans, one of the key partners in this Kananaskis bull trout study, and they are here particularly to take some eggs back to Winnipeg, where they're going to look at what impact global warming may have on future production of bull trout.
And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be rearing those eggs under different temperature regimes. So we're going to fluctuate the temperature to simulate climate warming scenarios. As these streams warm, these eggs will be affected differently than they currently are. And so we're trying to understand if these streams warm by 4 degrees or 6 degrees during spawning time, how will that affect the viability, the survival, and development of the eggs? And that will help us understand what constitutes critical habitat, but also how to protect those habitats. I am very optimistic about the future for bull trout, mostly because of collaborations like this. We have so many different groups that are so passionate about conserving and protecting populations like these.
We should have an idea soon on whether or not these in-stream incubators will be successful. If they are, we'll have another tool to use in an effort to ensure bull trout will continue to be integral to the intricate balance of Alberta's ecosystem.
Till next time, everyone, I'm Michael Short. Come on, let's go outdoors.
All right. Okay, excellent.
That's it?
Okay, awesome. So we're gonna do a quick 5-minute question period. If you want to stay up here, Ben.
Sure.
So we don't have too much time, so I think we have time to answer 2, maybe 3 questions. I've got a hand up already, so go ahead.
Just a quick question. So, are there any results of some of the initiatives that we just seen on the video here?
Yeah. So success rate was pretty high. The big factor that influenced success was it freezing to the bottom. Sadly, the conditions within this stream are all very good for spawning, hence why it's one of the best spawning areas in the province. I can't remember the numbers exactly, but I think it was around 80% success rate, so it was quite high. And in a hatchery setting, to get them to hatch, like 90 is pretty good. So this is pretty close for people just randomly trying to pick areas to put them.
Right on, thank you.
Yeah.
So my question is, where are the boundaries for DFO and the provincial government, the provincial body that is involved in streams? So that is never explained in these videos and things like that. And I know it gets quite convoluted in trying to establish some directives in that. So can you just give a Paul's notes on a little bit about the difference of what role DFO plays and what role the provincial government plays?
So within both those organizations, and maybe I'll pass it off to one of the reps from the province here, there are many different kind of groups within them. So the representative who was there was from DFO Science, which is different than people who might be doing like policy or enforcement type stuff. And so his research and mandate is purely research focused. And so, yeah, where jurisdictions and overlap lie, it comes down to scenario based in a lot of situations. Kenton, do you have more to feed in there?
Yeah, it is very kind of issue specific. So like in this case,
I can't hear you.
Sorry, it's very issue specific and topic specific. So in this case, dealing with handling these bull trout and moving eggs and fish around, that is very much in the realm of Alberta environmentally protected areas. So
right.
Fisheries biologists would lead those things. Any like regulatory issues or fish habitat is DFO. Regulatory is also provincial government, but there's different branches within environment to protect areas that deal with that a bit more. So I'm not quite as familiar with the regulatory side of things.
And when you think about the permits that you require for this, you would require a provincial fisheries research license. But because this is also a species at risk, you'd require a federal species at risk permit to be able to do this work. So there's a lot of different layers when working, or if industry was doing stuff, they wouldn't do stuff in here because it's a provincial park, but there would be different layers of legislation they would have to go through.
Right, so then DFO, when if it's moving river water and it's habitat that's being disturbed and they're building a bridge, where does it divide between province and, like, because you're doing this research, this is great, like, this is wonderful, but when that water is moving, is it DFO water that's being observed and managed, or is it provincial water that's being observed and managed?
I would say yes. I think it's both. And so there'd be multiple
really
layers
issue
of,
in the sense of the two layers of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's both levels of government would have some level of influence and jurisdiction over that.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. I think
I have to run, but Kenton said he'd answer all the questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. Where's the mouse? Oh, there it is. Okay. It wasn't there before. Okay. Great. So next up, we are going to have Kenton Newfield from the Alberta Environment and Protected Areas, who is going to talk about the Fall Creek bull trout recovery.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for. This is your microphone. That's my okay. Awesome. Thank you for having me. Appreciate everyone coming out on this beautiful evening. I do sometimes talk quietly, so please tell me if I am mumbling or trailing off. I'll try and project here. Yeah, that is one of my bad habits. So I'm going to talk about Fall Creek, which is a specific project we're working on, and we're working on bull trout recovery there. And there's a few different components, but Ben's presentation actually set me up really well and talked about a lot of the same things that I'm going to be talking about. So that was really great. So first, a bit of background about the system itself. So Fall Creek is a tributary to the Ram River. It's about 50 kilometers west of Rocky Mountain House in kind of west central Alberta. What makes Fall Creek so unique and special is that it is probably the most important bull trout spawning tributary for sure in the Ram River system, and probably in that whole middle North Saskatchewan river system. So the ACA has done some really cool studies that have shown bull trout migrating from as far away as the Clearwater River into Fall Creek to spawn. So it's kind of analogous to Smith-Dorian Creek, so where that video was that Ben showed, large congregations of those really big migratory fish spawning here. So it's a really special system. Because of that and that vulnerable population that's so visible, it is close to angling, which is to help protect those fish. But there are some other threats in the watershed. As has been mentioned a couple times already, there's cumulative threats throughout the whole east slopes, and so Fall Creek is no different. There's a lot of land use in the area. In particular, there's a lot of off-highway use. Historically, there were trails that crossed and paralleled the creek in a lot of places, and there was a lot of sediment that was getting into the creek from those trails. And so this was a known issue. We believed that there was enough sediment that it was potentially having an impact on these bull trout that were spawning there. And that prompted us to really focus in on Fall Creek as a priority for protecting bull trout in this area. So there's a couple phases to this project. So I'm going to call the first bit phase 1, and this happened back in 2018, or started in 2018. And the work was done not just by the government of Alberta, but the same partners who are in this room and are presenting on all these other topics. A lot of these same people and organizations were also involved in this. So what we did was we identified a section of trail that we thought was having the largest impacts on bull trout spawning in this stream. And it was an 11-kilometer section of trail, and within those 11 kilometers there were 54 trail crossings, which is a lot for that length of trail. Essentially, it was paralleling the trail, or paralleling the stream, and crossing back and forth the whole length. And this was right through some of that critical spawning habitat. So not great. In addition to all the sediment that was potentially coming in from the trail, off-highway vehicles were driving right through spawning areas, so potentially crushing eggs and fish that were in the gravel. So this prompted this work. We reclaimed that whole 11 kilometers of trail, so completely decommissioned it, restabilized and vegetated the banks at all the stream crossings. So on the left here, there's an example of one of those, probably one of the worst offenders. You can just see the bear trail leading up to the creek at the bottom there, and a couple of years later, it's almost fully vegetated in. So we reclaimed all the crossings, and we put in physical access control to deter folks from trying to get back in. And it's been pretty effective. We've gone back every year to look at the trail, and it's grown in well in most places, especially in the places where we were able to effectively kind of keep traffic from heading back in. In addition to just the habitat reclamation work, we also instituted a monitoring program for the bull trout population. So we went in every year for 5 years, from 2018 to 2022, and electrofished the stream. So you could see an example of that in the video that we just saw. Essentially, we sampled a standard length of stream in the same way every year, and we did 8 different sites each year, and we looked at the number of fish we caught in the different size classes throughout that time. So this graph on the left here is a bit busy, so I apologize, but what it's showing kind of 2 main things. The first is the general trend in the population. So if you see this blue line here, you can see from 2018 up to 2022, there's a general increase in the population, which was really great to see. We were actually a little bit surprised that we saw a change so quickly. 5 years isn't a lot of time for a bull trout population. Their generation time is usually about 7 years. So this was a really quick response, and we're actually very happy to see that. So the second main point to take away from this graph is that even though the trend is increasing, it's still in what we would call a high-risk state. So based on other watersheds in the province, we would compare the similar methods of sampling and the catch rates we would find in other watersheds to what we found here. It was still at a relatively low density. So even though it looked like it was increasing, we thought and think that there's still a lot of room to further improve this population and increase its density. And so that's really prompted phase 2 of this project, which is what I'm really excited to talk about today. And so we're calling this Upper Fall Creek. I didn't mention this before, but as you might suspect, there's a waterfall on Fall Creek. It's about 7.5 kilometers up from the mouth. And this waterfall is a complete barrier to fish. So there are no bull trout above this waterfall, and there never have been. All the spawning that currently takes place in Fall Creek takes place below this waterfall. But as you might imagine, everything that happens upstream, to your point, flows downstream. And so sediment and habitat issues from upstream are going to flow down and impact the spawning habitat below the falls. So our first objective in Upper Fall Creek is to build on the habitat reclamation work we did in phase 1 and continue to reduce sediment entering the streams above the waterfall. And I'll talk a bit more about the specifics of that in a moment here. The second objective, which kind of builds on what Ben was just talking about, is you could call it a few different things: range expansion stocking, conservation translocation, recovery stocking. But the basic premise is our objective will be to establish a new population of bull trout, self-sustaining population above the waterfall in Upper Fall Creek. And that's really something that's quite novel for the province. Ben talked about some of the research that's being done to support that. And so that's, I'll get into some more details about that as well here in a moment. But before I do that, back to the habitat aspect, because it really is very important. Before we think about translocating fish or stocking fish, we want to make sure that the place we're putting them is suitable. So starting this year, actually led by FCC, they're going to be doing some work to reduce sediment inputs into Upper Fall Creek. So we had a consultant go out in 2024 and identify a bunch of locations along the stream where, again, motorized trails were causing sedimentation into the stream. FCC has picked out some high priority sites from that list and are planning to go in this year and reclaim those sites and hopefully put in some more access control to keep traffic off those locations. And the goal is to reduce sediment into the stream and improve habitat for the bull trout, which will hopefully be going in there soon. On the left here, of course I picked the worst example because it just shows what I'm talking about best, but this is an example of a gully that's formed on the trail leading down into Upper Fall Creek right around here. So at the bottom of this hill, there is a tributary to Fall Creek, and you can imagine all this sediment is now downstream in the streams. So a big issue. So the second objective here is bull trout recovery stocking. So it's really quite exciting for us. We haven't done it much in the province. We've stocked bull trout a few times, but the objective of that stocking hasn't explicitly been for species conservation or recovery. It's been more ad hoc and sometimes focused on recreation. So this is really the first time we're stocking bull trout with the goal of improving the status and recovering populations. There's a lot of thought that goes into this, a lot of background work to prepare. A couple of the major factors we're thinking about is disease. So Ben did mention whirling disease in his presentation earlier. We're making sure that all the fish that we're putting above the falls are disease-free because we don't want to start any population that's already off on the wrong foot. The other consideration is genetics. So we want to make sure that all the fish that go in there are pure bull trout, aren't hybridized with brook trout, which are present in the rest of the Ram River system. And we want to make sure that there's enough genetic diversity in the population that we establish so it can sustain itself in the long term. And so there's three main methods we're using to do this, or we're planning to use to do this range expansion stocking. The first is probably the simplest, but has some risks to it, and that's just directly translocating fish from below the falls to above the falls. And we're going to be using juvenile fish, so smaller fish, because there's a lot more of them, so they can sustain, a small number being translocated. And because they're smaller, the hope is that they'll have more of their life to imprint on that habitat above the falls and really grow there and stay there. The second and third methods we're using for stocking involve moving fertilized eggs. So similar to that video you just saw, the plan is to go to Lower Fall Creek below the falls where bull trout currently spawn, collect eggs and milt, fertilize those eggs, and translocate some of those eggs into these similar in-stream incubation pucks, as they were calling them, and translocate those into Upper Fall Creek. There's some risk with that because this is kind of the next stage of bull trout recovery stocking from the research that Ben was showing. And the difference here is we don't know where bull trout would prefer to spawn in Upper Fall Creek. We'll make an educated guess based on temperature and habitat, but we don't know for sure. And so there's always a risk that where we put those eggs, something might happen to them. It might freeze, they might get washed out, something might happen. So to not put all our eggs in one basket, we're also planning to take some of those fertilized eggs, bring them back to the hatchery, hatch them to the fry stage, so just a couple centimeters long, and then next spring put them back into Fall Creek. So 3 different methods, and we're hoping between those 3 there'll be enough survival and establishment that a new bull trout population will establish here. And it's important to note that this is not something we'll be using everywhere all the time. It's a very specific tool and is only applicable in a few cases, I think. So in this case, we're trying to increase the resiliency of the Fall Creek population, expand its range. If something were to happen to the lower population, there'll be this duplicate that can help sustain it. But like has been mentioned, with cumulative effects, this doesn't address any of the underlying factors. So in most of the province, across most of the range, this will not be the tool that we'll be using. We'll have to focus on habitat and non-native species and angling and dams and all these other things that are affecting bull trout. But this is a kind of a very unique, specific project that is exciting because we can learn a lot and hopefully help this population. So what's next? So we have a whole project team which is built from all the same partners from the Native Trout Collaborative. So we meet regularly. We're building stocking plans and we're building plans to reclaim that habitat. And starting in 2026, we're hoping to do the habitat work and start with the stocking as well, which will go on for hopefully 3 years. And then we'll monitor and assess and go from there. And that is all. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Kenton. We are going to do a really quick question period. We'll just do a few more questions. I think we'll do some of the ones from the chat. So the first question is the focus on bull trout just because they are the most prevalent species? Is there any studies / recovery stocking for Athabasca rainbows or West Slope cutthroats?
Yeah, great question. In this case, we're focused on bull trout because bull trout are the only native trout species in Fall Creek. There are introduced trout species, but bull trout are the only native one. It's outside of the native range of West Slopes and Athabasca rainbow trout. But there has been and is a lot of work ongoing right now for West Slope cutthroat trout recovery stocking as well. So we're actively working on developing plans to do similar types of projects for West Slope cutthroat trout and come up with a process for doing it well. It's still in the early stages, but I think for West Slope cutthroat trout specifically, stocking will probably be a much more critical tool for recovery across the range, just because we are dealing with hybridization with rainbow trout across almost everywhere in West Slope range. So I think, yes, recovery stocking will be a very important tool for West Slopes and probably Athabascas as well. I'm just a bit less familiar with them. So.
Do we have any questions in the room? Yes.
Because I can't walk around Rand Falls and that, there's always the cows that they let free range. How much of an impact do they have on sedimentation?
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh, sorry. The question was, how much impact do cows have on sedimentation? And it'll vary a lot from system to system. In some systems, I think it probably is significant if there's not proper management, if cows are in the stream. I think in that area specifically, it's often complicated by horses, which are also in the same area, wild horses. And so both those combined create some issues in some cases, yeah. Because it's so diffuse, I mean, others can speak better to this than I, so I should watch myself, but because it is such a diffuse issue in a lot of watersheds, it is quite difficult to manage. And I think there are others who are working hard on that, so I'll let them speak up if they have anything to add, but yeah, it can be an issue at times.
We'll take one more question over here.
Just a quick one. You talked about heading off folks from coming in with off-road vehicles. What's that look like? Is it signage or is it not people out there talking to people, but
it's a mix.
Barricades?
Yeah, so it's a mixture of things. So we did put up signage, educational signage to explain what we were doing, why we were doing it, and why it's important to stay out of the water. We also did construct physical access barriers, so there were some pinch points where we could build berms and make it difficult for people to get in there on motorized vehicles. It's public land, so it is open to the public, and our goal is not to keep the public out, it's to keep, in this case, motorized vehicles out of the stream. So we did do some kind of physical access control berms and barriers and stuff to keep people out.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Kenton. Let's give him another round of applause. Excellent. So that concludes our first two presentations. We are going to take a quick break. We are only going to do a 5-minute break. So we will start back up again at 7:10, and we'll try to be strict about that. 7:10. All right. See you guys later, chat. Okay, we are going to start back up again. Can everyone joining us online hear me? Can I get a thumbs up? Amazing, thank you, Angela. Okay, so next up, we are going to have a presentation from Deanna Del Valle, who is with Freshwater Conservation Canada, on low-tech process-based restoration in southern Alberta.
Hi everyone. So I'm going to be talking about, as Casper mentioned, this new restoration technique that we've been implementing in southern Alberta, oftentimes in native trout habitat. So this is just a little bit about who Mile and Casper work for. So we are Freshwater Conservation Canada now, but we used to be called Trout Unlimited Canada. Some people don't know we changed names yet, so we've been putting this up at the start of most of our presentations. We're still an organization with volunteer chapters across Canada and professional staff in Calgary and Guelph. And our priorities have remained the same despite the name change. So why we are implementing this restoration technique is because lots of streams in southern Alberta look like this. They're dry, they're degraded, they're incised, they're channelized. We call them almost bowling alley streams because water will just like run straight through them. There's no structure, no habitat. The vegetation isn't very healthy. And so this is kind of the problem we're trying to address. So part of what caused this problem is something we call structural starvation. So this is the lack of wood and other forms of structure in streams that's taking away that habitat. So this was caused primarily by the historic hunting of beavers and the removal of their dams, and also just the removal of woody debris from streams because people historically perceived beavers and their dams as pests and an issue on the landscape. But this actually resulted in less water on the landscape, decreased habitat for fish and other aquatic species, and created incised and degraded channels. But we now see this as part of a cycle with the possibility of returning to a stable and healthy state over time. So this is a picture of that cycle from a restoration manual. So on the left, you see streams that might look kind of like the ones I showed you on the first slide. They're dry, they're channelized, they're really narrow, and then once you introduce structure back into them, they might start to meander, they start to widen, and maybe beavers come back and build more structure, and then eventually you just get this like nice multi-threaded channel with healthy streamside vegetation, lots of aquatic habitat, a super high water table, which is great in southern Alberta where our streams tend to run dry without this extra structure. And pretty much like the beavers do this the best. So all we're trying to do is imitate beavers. So this technique was pioneered by researchers at Utah State University and has gained momentum in the Western United States and Canada in the past like decade or so, in the United States in the past probably like 5 years here in Canada. In case you haven't guessed it yet, we're reintroducing structure in simple, low-cost ways when we implement LTPBR. So this often looks like shoving sticks and mud in the creek to mimic beaver activity and wood accumulation. And everything that we use in these structures is permeable or is temporary, so it'll eventually degrade back into the ecosystem. And we do design some of these structures with some permeability, so we're not cutting off like all water flow. So it's not like a traditional dam. So the first type of structure we use here at Freshwater Conservation Canada is a beaver dam analog. So that's what's pictured on the right hand of the screen. They mimic and promote beaver activity. So basically we just get in the creek and pile a bunch of sticks and dirt and try to make the best beaver dam we can. They span the whole channel and are constructed with wood and fill material, which is usually just dirt and rocks. And they're anchored in with untreated wooden fence posts. This is an example of the before and after of that BDA I just showed you on the last slide. So you can see on the left, the channel, like I mentioned earlier, is incised and narrow. The runoff just flows really quickly through the stream. This stream was running dry at the end of the summer, and the stream banks were eroded, and we weren't getting a lot of vegetation on the stream banks. Now, with these BDAs implemented, the water is being retained, the channel has been widened, the runoff is slowed, and you can start to see more green growing on those banks, which are all good things that we like to see. The second type of structure we use at Freshwater Conservation Canada when we implement LTVBR is a post-assisted log structure, otherwise known as a PAL. And these are designed to mimic and promote natural wood accumulation. We're essentially just like throwing a bunch of logs in a creek and pounding them together with, again, those untreated wooden fence posts so they don't float away. This is designed to create stream diversity and a variety of different habitats. They can also impact water flow depending on the goals of your project and what you kind of want to see happen after you implement these. There's a couple different ways you can implement these structures depending on what your goals are. So you can put them in the middle of the channel, you can make them span the channel, or you can attach them to the bank. The channel spanning PAL is similar to a BDA, but won't have as much fill, so won't be pooling water quite as much. So since we started building low-tech process-based restoration in 2021, our organization has built over 280 structures. So on the left, you can see a time lapse of our team building one of these. You can see that basically, like I said, we're just throwing sticks and dirt into the creek until it starts to pool some water behind them. And hopefully in the time lapse, you've already seen like how much water they can store just even within a short amount of time. So after we built those BDAs, here are some of the benefits we saw. So on the left is one that we built on a private property. And these were some ranchers that had beavers on their property in the past and really wanted to see them return. So we're hoping that with this like improved habitat, beavers will come back. But these creeks typically were pretty shallow and very dry, and now you can see that there's even more water stored behind them, which is great for them since they graze cattle on these lands occasionally and they were really getting dry. Then on the right, this is downstream of one of our BDA and PAL projects, and you can see that the stream is becoming multi-threaded, kind of like that first picture that I showed you from the textbook earlier. And the best benefit that we've seen after reintroducing these structures is that beaver have come back to the landscape. So this is one of our BDAs that is now being maintained by a beaver. We put some trail cams up and saw them swimming around next to our site. And we think that they've maybe started to even like patch or add to those, and sometimes upstream, they'll go on and build their own beaver dams above where we've built, now that the habitat's good enough for them to return. So this is an example of somewhere where we're building these in native trout habitat. So on the top right, you can see a map of this creek. So on the blue portion of the creek, there's literally hundreds of fish that live in this blue portion of the creek. But in the orange portion, which branches upwards, we only saw one fish during the same population sample. So we are trying to reconnect this orange portion to the blue portion by building some of this like low-tech process-based restoration. The orange portion does run dry, it's super shallow, it's not very good trout habitat right now, but we think that trout will probably use it once the habitat conditions are good. So on the right, or on the left again, was a time lapse of us building a BDA, and again you can see like just how quickly we store water, and this is where the fish like to hang out, in these creeks. So having like these nice deep pools is really good for their return. As you've probably seen in lots of our videos and pictures, this is not something that we can accomplish alone. Our conservation team only has 6 people on it, and it would really hurt my back if we had to build all these by ourselves. So we can't do this without all the volunteers who come out, many of the partner organizations who are in this room who have worked on this together. And if you're interested in getting involved, this is the QR code to our Eventbrite. If you're here, you've already been on our Eventbrite, but you can subscribe to that to get notified of when we have volunteer events in your area. You can also follow us on Instagram and on our website. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, getting out there, getting your hands in the mud, it's the best way to learn about this type of restoration. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Awesome, good job, Deanna. Next up, we're going to do questions. So do we have any questions from the audience? Yes.
I don't know if
That is a great question. Yeah, so sedimentation, like we do release sediment. Some sediment does get released into the creeks when we're doing this, but after we've installed them, they actually trap the sediment that like we're pushing downstream. We do also find that it like clears pretty quickly, thankfully, since we're just using, like shovels and like ourselves. And typically when we build them, we try to start with the most downstream BDA first and then move upstream so that this downstream BDA will actually like capture most of the sediment from upstream. So we're not, having harmful effects like further downstream. Yeah.
We do, we have two.
Okay, so we have a question from the chat. So the question is, have you tried just reintroducing real beavers? Do you need to improve social license from native beavers returning to these areas to avoid persecution?
Yes, so that is a great question. So it is much more challenging to reintroduce beavers to an area because there's so many permits that go along with moving wildlife. So what we're trying to achieve with this project is creating habitat that beavers want to return to on their own. So with this, we're seeing that beavers are moving back into these areas where they haven't been for the past couple of years without us having to physically move them. But obviously, beavers are the best at doing this. So that is the main goal of this, is getting them back into the area. Okay, and then we have another question that says, how many BDAs are maintained by beavers after the habitat has been created for them? Does this have a high success rate? So I would say that this depends on how far the nearest beaver population is from our project. We've had beavers walk in Whispering Pines how many kilometers?
At least
at least 2 kilometers to get to this new habitat we've created for them. So it does take time, but we have seen some success rate with this. Yeah. Okay. Oh.
I just have a quick question. You're talking about, and you mentioned an example that you were on private property and you built these BDAs. Can someone who has property and have a little pond request for you guys to come out and fix it up to this capacity then?
Yeah.
How do you get a hold of the project?
Yeah, us and other organizations in this room are happy to help individuals if they are interested in.
To contact you?
Yeah, you can contact us. Yeah.
So how long did it take when you had the beaver come back? Did you time it? Was it a month or was it next year or following year? How long did it take? And then you saw beaver come into where you had built one of the dams.
I think, Elliot knows this question better.
The one project, we built everything in 2022. And then we were in 2023, we spent probably 30 hours of planning to move beaver back, and then they just came back on their own.
In 2023.
The next year, in fall. And then the time-lapse video that Deanna showed, they were there probably immediately because there was already beavers around. So, and some of our projects, they won't be back on their own, maybe ever. We might have to move them around.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends.
All right, thank you for all the questions, everybody. So let's give Deanna another round of applause. So next up, we are going to have a presentation from Noreen Ambrose from Cows and Fish, who will be presenting on how can you support native trout. I'm just going to get it up here.
It's really great to see so many people here tonight, and I'm really glad to have the opportunity to talk to you, both online as well as those of you in person. I want to thank Amy, my colleague, so if you have questions about what I'm talking about, there's another person in the room. She's sitting over there with the gray toque. And for this great image and some of the other content, the work that Cows and Fish does is focused on helping people sort of understand the role that we all play in affecting the land and the water, and how those interconnections to our land uses and land choices, can be made differently sometimes. And so this shot talks about what Ben started off talking about, which is cumulative effects essentially. So what's another word for that complicated thing? Death by 1,000 cuts. Lots of little things, lots of many things, whether it's recreation, whether it's logging, whether it's angling, all of those things contribute to changing the landscape. And in this case, what we're talking about tonight, changing the water and the land that the fish rely upon. And we often think that fish just rely on water, but they're a product of the land, and the water is a product of the land around it. It doesn't just, it's not just water. You've heard about how important the practices and the restoration techniques are. So the places like this are kind of messy looking, but this is a beautiful spot, native trout stream that we want to see. We want to have more messy, beautiful spots like this that have wood and complexity and overhanging banks and shade and sun to provide the kind of things that fish need. And how do we do that? How do we as a kind of society, how do we as community do those things? Well, part of that, of course, is our choices, and our that can be restoration, like you just heard from Deanna about. But it's about thinking about how do we connect land to water, and that interface zone, those stream banks, the shoreline, the floodplain is this thing we call riparian areas, and riparian areas are really that interface, that connection between what's happening on the land and on the water. They're the last defense of things getting into the water in most cases. And so you already heard about the importance of these fish, and it's of course not just about native trout. There's lots of other native fish that are important too that we don't fish for, and aquatic life and water quality that are important. And all of these kind of land use choices affect our ecosystems and our water quality. In order to have those great functions, if you think about yourself as a human, you need to have certain functions working to be healthy. You expect to be able to have your respiratory system and your circulatory systems right, so you can breathe and have blood flowing. Ecosystems are like that too. They have functions we expect them to be able to do if they're healthy. Things like in riparian areas, we expect them to be able to trap and store sediment. We expect them to slow water down, which means they resist erosion and store energy, store water for later release that could be, back into the stream for stream use by, say, trout. So if we have healthy ecosystems and make choices that result in those functions happening, the stuff that Deanna talked about, low-tech process-based restoration, these are the processes we expect these kinds of healthy ecosystems to have. If they're overloaded or if they're unhealthy, then we have situations that look more like this. The stream coming in from the left is pretty muddy looking, and it's because all the soil from wherever it came upstream couldn't be filtered out. Maybe it was stirred up directly in the channel, and that contributes to not great water quality downstream, and certainly isn't great for native trout. We didn't really talk about that, maybe the why. Why isn't sediment? There is obviously soil in streams, in many streams. Most native trout streams are more gravels and cobbles, and I'm sure those of you that do lots of angling recognize that. But maybe for those that aren't as familiar, why is soil bad for fish? Well, it buries the eggs. You saw the little mini incubators in the hockey pucks. Well, imagine if those eggs are just in there by themselves, or in the hockey puck that has cost thousands of dollars of work to get there. If it gets covered in soil, it's buried and smothered, right? So that's just one reason, but that's why we don't want that excess soil in streams. And we need those opportunities, whether it's carving sideways and dumping in sediment. It doesn't have the right things. Where's the overhanging cover opportunities for fish here? Where's the water cleaning opportunities here? Here it's contributing lots of soil and not improving benefits. It doesn't matter what the land use is. Quads, cows, culverts that are poorly placed, campers, clear-cut logging or logging in any, all of these erosion pathways, these ways that soils can move because of water moving, all contribute. So, we might want to think, well, like, what's the cause of the problem? It's all of these things. It's not any one of these things. So each of us then also has an opportunity to, whatever we do on the land and near the water or not near the water, we have an opportunity to really influence the health of our landscapes. You saw this picture already. Black is bad. That's the answer here. Black or dark gray means there's no fish left pretty much. There's no pure Westlaw cutthroat trout, or none to speak of. And this isn't just, this was as of 2018. Since this was done, new places have already blinked out. So there's urgency here. There's a real need to do something. And so I charge you guys with what can we do? That's the thought behind my presentation. What can we do? We did a survey a number of years ago of people who live in the eastern slopes, so west of us, and people in the buffer, which includes Calgary residents. And a lot of people filled that survey out. And what we found was that almost 90% of people said that habitat for native trout, along with habitat for mammals and clean water resources and birds, it's important to them. It's either very important or important. So we know that people care. So how do we make change, or why do we need to make change? Well, we know that maybe not everybody thinks a messy stream is actually good. This wood falling in, this is a good thing. This is habitat. These banks that have roots and plants hanging over, that's a good thing. We want deep binding roots holding the banks together, providing overhead cover, resisting erosion, trapping sediment that might be flowing from the land. So providing those things, of course, is something we need to do to get that clean, cold, clear, and connected habitat that trout need. So in order to have all those pieces, it's about land use and land choices in many cases. So many of you probably camp. I camp. But if we cut all the trees down, like the picture on the bottom left shows, next to our campsites that are almost always on the river and stream banks, because that's honestly where the best camping spots are. Whether it's to make a hot dog stick, or for big firewood that we take home, or put our privy on the edge of the bank, or even not near the edge of the bank, or our camper. This, for those of you that can see the bottom right-hand picture of the shot with the trailer, that's the creek. And all that gravel is the dry creek bed, or almost dry. There's only a little bit of water left in Dutch Creek at this point of the day in the late summer. So, every time we drive there, we reduce vegetation cover. So, this is also about good planning and policy, not just individual use, of course. We know that lots of people, we already talked about recreational vehicles, but still a lot of people are crossing creeks in their vehicles. Crossing is still pretty common. So what can we do? Well, cattle producers are taking action, and many of them are, moving their cattle away with offsite watering systems and electric fencing to reduce that pressure, because cows need to drink water, obviously, and they also like to linger near the water. If you have a motorized vehicle, not driving through the creek is a pretty simple answer. Steer clear, heed the signs, use the bridges. Building our planning and our bridges of the right size, of course, continues to be a challenge, because side-by-sides are getting wider, bigger, and a lot of the older bridges are still small. But volunteering with some of the recreation clubs to help do those kinds of things, those are great opportunities. Doing the kind of restoration techniques that Deanna talked about, or others, are good opportunities as well. This is actually a picture from in Calgary. Presumably in days long gone by, the stream, this stream was native trout habitat. It hasn't had native trout in it for a long time, but it is repairable. This is 1 year later. This was a lot of effort. Those are a lot of human bodies, and for a tiny site. So prevention is key. We need to keep what we have and do good stuff, more good stuff, not just try to repair things, but when we can also give it a helping hand with restoration techniques like this. So I encourage you to sign up for the many entities and organizations in this room that do those kinds of events as well. But also just think about and talk to your neighbors, talk to your family and friends about their approaches. What do you do that can support native trout? Besides keeping them wet when you catch them and put them away, they don't breathe air. They also need good, clean water. So with that, thank you, and that's my contact information if you're interested. I'll put it back up in a second. I want to thank the Cows and Fish members that make up our organization, and Native Trout Collaborative, of course, to make this all possible as well. So thank you.
Excellent. So we'll go straight into questions. Does anyone have any questions in the room? Yes.
Do you know how many cows are actually in the watershed? Like how many they're allowed to ranch? Like is there any kind of census on that, or is it just kind of?
Yeah. So the question is, do I know how many cows are in a watershed, or is there a
Is there tracking?
a tracking?
Yes.
Yeah. So on public land, there is set allowable amounts and allowable lengths of time and entry and exit points if it's on public land, which most native trout habitat these days, or a lot of it, is on public land. So they have defined amounts of numbers and timing, absolutely. On private land, obviously that's not the case. Obviously there's recommended stocking rates, but of course it's not public information. So it's also, I wouldn't say you can easily find it for public land, but it is set by the province, who works with the allotment holders who have grazing rights, or permit holders, depending. Yeah.
Yes, there is time. We've got another question over here.
My bad. Yeah, I just got a question for riparian zones. So what would be the most beneficial plants to create some? Because I'm still a bit of a beginner, and I assume like red willow is like a good starter plant, but it'd be cool to have like a list.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's a good plant in a riparian area? Anything that would naturally grow there that is from that ecosystem. So it definitely depends on where you're from. If you're out on the open prairie versus if you're in the foothills, obviously the plants that are like to grow there are a little different. But generally willows, if you get high elevation, there's less willows in riparian areas. Cottonwoods, particularly good on the prairie. And things like red osier dogwood are all in many riparian areas. So they like that, they have their feet wet, they like to be a little bit wet, and they're great deep-rooted plants as well. So we do have a fact sheet. It's on our, I don't have any of them with me at the moment, but absolutely you can reach out to us, and we have some riparian planting fact sheets and resources if you're interested as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Law, or comment. So you're addressing this and the reduction of silt into the river and the whole thing and that, but not one of the presentations have talked about the fact of turning the rocks over and looking at the larvae, studying the nymphs, studying the food source, and showing where the high silt is, and having people turn rocks over and there is no food for the fish. And I just think if people would go out and even walk along the river, they don't need to be fishing or whatever, but turn rocks and see and get a feel for the food that is essential, and so much of it is choked out by silt.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's why I did say other aquatic organisms need this, not just native trout, obviously. Yeah. And certainly we know that the aquatic insects that live in these places also totally change. The community of insects changes with water quality changes as well, and you get things that can hack that. You know, just like the fish community changes because they can't handle the temperature and the muddiness. So that's absolutely true. I think, you know, us looking at the little things are all important, and certainly if there's nothing to eat, they're not going to be there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Any other questions? We have time for one more.
I have one more question.
So the question is from the chat. Is there funding to help rancher fence off creeks to keep their cows out of public watersheds?
I can't do that.
Yeah, so is there funding to help cattle ranchers fence off cattle from the creeks? So there certainly are lots of projects and programs that some of the entities in this room have at times, but there's also a provincial OFCAF, which is the On-Farm Canadian Agricultural Funding, I think is the acronym. It's a long acronym, but there is some fencing. It has to be related to rotational grazing. Some of the other funding that was a provincial federal initiative actually closed last year, unfortunately, because it was oversubscribed. But there definitely is, and I would, you know, many of the conservation organizations involved in this kind of work, if we don't have it ourselves, we know sometimes other partners or entities that do. So I would definitely feel free to reach out, and if you look it up on the provincial and federal websites right now, you can also find it with Agriculture, Alberta Agriculture, no, Ag Canada.
All right, thank you again. Let's give her another round of applause. So next up, we have Sherry Tarrington from CPAWS, who will be presenting Being Trout, an interactive, introspective native trout invitation.
I had fun with my eyes.
Pass those ones down so I didn't grab it.
Just-
Now you can take one.
There we go. Is there a remote? Yes. Awesome. So forward, forward, backwards, backwards.
Nice.
And then escape to get to my tabs.
Yes.
And will you stand there to make sure that
I will stand
don't
here.
fall on my face? Okay. So we're gonna try something a little different. I stand up here. Oh, sorry.
Otherwise, I would have done that.
Sherry, the interpreter. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I am thrilled to see so many fish lovers in one room. As you will hear from many of our organizations and partners, we're often preaching to the choir. So we're often talking to folks that are on our team already. And so I work in the education side of our CPAWS mighty team of 10. And our ambition is to expand the choir. So where we're well known for our conservation efforts, we've got some beautiful campaigns going on right now involving forestry, coal, lack of coal, I should say that more appropriately. And these campaigns are so important and really do connect with a lot of Albertans, probably most of you in this room. We want to increase the choir. So part of our prerogative, our goals and vision is to actually increase it through education. Now, many of our partners have fantastic education. I know many of the communicators and interpreters on the sides of many of our partners, and so there's lots of good work being done. We took this want to expand our community with the opportunity working with Alberta and the Native Trout Collaborative. And so where we took our ambitions to is online, because the internet does reach most folks. And we wanted to make it accessible, fun, and applicable to a lot of different groups. So schools, by all means, are one of the largest populations that we work with. However, we're expanding. We're working with a lot of immigration settlement agencies, working with professional development. I've actually been downtown Calgary a lot lately, and it's thrilling when you can get new folks joining our choir and team. So I wanted to show you around the Being Trout world. So I'm going to introduce you to where to find it, and how things can expand. But I really want to touch on a lot of the ideas that have been brought forward, and the idea of talking to each other. Coming back from the pandemic, I think one of the exciting things is being able to have a face-to-face with other human beings. That's why I'm really enjoying this evening. So where this is online, we really want folks like you to take this home and bring it to your communities. So maybe you volunteer with a Girl Guide group, or maybe on one of your volunteer opportunities, you can do an activity from this cache of fun activities and make trout that much more tangible. I worked for a decade with national parks, and we knew the trick. Put the word bear in the title and people will come. It was insane. Bears and ice, bears and fire. Folks came out of the woodwork. We want the same thing to happen with the word trout. And so working with these activities and these communications, education and human interface, I think, is the wave to increase our choir. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our Being Trout Education Kit, which currently lives on our website, CPAWS Southern Alberta. I'll list the webpage in a few moments. We're working really hard to have it as a standalone, so that is coming. Right now, we wanted to make sure that all the work was hosted and could be found. And this picture kind of says it all in terms of our education wants and goals. Fun, active, getting people outside. The access to trout happens outside. And so having folks be aware of all the gorgeous species that are umbrellaed, keystoned via our native trout populations. It can sometimes just start with a walk at Fish Creek in Calgary. It can start with a connection to a tree, or as you were talking about the plants like the dogwood, and just recognizing the impact of one species on others. So being trout, check it out on our website. We will let folks know if and when the move happens, but right now it is live and ready to go on the website. And I was wondering if we could just visit it together. We're just gonna tab over. Thank you, the dark is not good for my eyes. Yeah, so this is where we go into one particular activity. So where you saw the 3 activities listed, we've opened it up into one that we're going to do here tonight. Oh, yeah. They put me at the end of the night for a reason. We want, and this is also critical, is we find that often trout education, bear education, grasslands education tends to always be connected with science, math, which makes sense because it is. But wow, you can expand into language arts and art and all of the other beautiful curriculum that is part of our Alberta school world. So this activity is Stories from the River, and I'm going to play a video with a beautiful perspective on trout shared by an angler, because it's very important to recognize that trout matter to lots of different folk. And your job is simple. I might actually ask if we could bring the lights up slightly, just so folks can actually see what they're writing. Perfect, that's perfect. That's enough, that's perfect. So we're gonna play a video for you with a perspective of an angler, beautifully told. And I simply want you to list 10 to 15 words that you receive from this individual as they tell their story. Now, many of you are trout people. So if there are 10 to 15 words that connect with you and native trout, by all means, list them. And then I'm going to take you on part 2 once you've got your words. I don't want to give too much away. You do see the word poem, but don't be scared. Don't be scared. This is fun, okay? So I'm going to just scroll down on your guide so you don't need to read all the instructions. But I'm going to go right to this link, and if I hit it, it should play. Oh, yeah, I've got it right up. Thank you, Casper. So 10 to 15 words. Oh, thank you. One more time. 3 minutes.
Once I actually hit the water, I feel like I'm at home, calm, at peace. I feel more like myself, like I'm meant to be there, and honored that I can be there, that I have that privilege to do that. I'm Kate Palmeria. I am an angler. I also am part of the Calgary Women's Fly Fishers Club. What I love about fishing is it takes me out of whatever's going on in my life completely, and I only focus on everything that's around me, because the pursuit is the fish. you're so focused, you're dialed in, you're really just like enmeshed with the environment. Like in comparison to a lot of my friends, I would say that I'm a relatively new angler. In order to get a fish, fly fishing, you really have to tune in to everything. So like, what does the water look like? Where do I think the fish is? How cold is it? Is this the right fly? What bugs are hatching around me? So I literally have to take everything around me and only think about that. When I'm part of the Calgary Women's Fly Fishers group, this community of like female anglers, it's like strength and empowerment, just knowing that like I can go out there without being like guided by somebody, and I can find my own adventure and find the fish. What I get out of it essentially is a lot of friendship, community, strength, and just like the pursuit of fish, trying to like get to know this place that I live in, that I live, work, and play in, and know it more intimately. I care about fish because when I look at them, I just see how beautiful they are and like how complex they must be, because they're different. Every single fish you pick up is different. Every time I come in contact with fish or see a fish, I'm just like, thank you. Thank you for giving me this moment, for allowing me this opportunity to be outside and look for you and just say hi. And whenever you catch a fish and release it back into the water, it's like you're giving the river a handshake. You're saying, thank you. I think it's important to care for trout in our habitat because if trout are there, that means that that water is still healthy. And we as Albertans rely on this water to live. As a community of women that really care about the outdoors, I think to people that don't necessarily care about it as much as we do, maybe just out of not knowing, go outside and look at this place. And I know that once you get out there, you'll know that it's a beautiful spot. Think about what happens when it's gone and like how much work it would probably take to maybe even get to a fraction of what it looks like now. I want to give that to my kids one day. I want to take them out and share this really special thing that I cherish and be able to provide that for generations further. And so we won't be able to do that if we keep going the way that we are.
Perfect. So, wow, lists happened. This is exciting. Gonna just switch tabs back to the PowerPoint. I don't know where I'd be without you, Cass. Thank you. You can just go right to the river. Perfect. Yay. So, haha, you created a beautiful list. And the word poem was mentioned. Poems do not have to be complicated. Poems can be delightful, simple, and very real. Some of the most are simple, and I think the ones that I remember are absolutely that. So for this activity, I'm going to ask you to create a trout haiku. Now, many of you might be, haiku, I can't remember, we did that in like grade 6. It's a very simple poem that has 5 syllables first line, 7 syllables second line, and 5 syllables third line. I see a lot of nods, this is exciting. So this, you're probably wondering, why is CPAWS making me do this? We are bringing your emotion, your past, your relationships, your connection to these animals and asking you to share them with yourself. What? And then, if you feel good, if you feel like, you can share this with others. So maybe we could, I don't know, silly idea, we could take any haikus that are created that want to be shared, and we can bring them together in a way that I think would be a really cool thing to share as part of our Trout Collaborative. But I want to give you 2 minutes to start, and while you're starting, I'll read you one, because you're probably like, what, 5, 7? Can this be done? It can. Okay, here's an example. Water, clear as glass. Wind ripples on the surface. The trout finds its home. Just going to give 1 minute to get those juices started. I see pens moving in the audience here. I'm hoping at home you might be creating something too. So your word list was just the beginning. And where I see pens moving, we're connecting to that person. Some people, this is not their cup of tea, and that is fine. The importance is to share the different ways that we passionately connect with our ideas. I even did a slide with the haiku how-to, but I think you've got it. So while you're finishing up those beautiful works of words, I wanted to bring us all back to the Being Trout Education Kit, which again is live on our CPAWS Southern Alberta site. The website is listed here. Tabbing through our education world, and there you'll find Being Trout Education Kit. There's something there for everyone. Teachers in your world, volunteers in your world, just folks that you know that love trout and being outdoors. These are invitations to get outside, many of them starting inside, because sometimes we have to instigate that outdoor world in an indoor person. So on behalf of CPAWS and CPAWS Education, we want to thank everyone for including us tonight. And the work is continuing, and we're really excited to continue building these bridges. And I will take those haikus back to my team for those that want to share, and I'm sure we can find a way to share these if you want to. You do not need to. And if there's any questions, I'm here, but I would love to hear a few before I leave tonight. Thank you. Yes, questions?
Oh, I want to share my.
Oh, please come up. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, here's a haiku that I just wrote based on that video. Tune into everything. Breathe in. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Breathe out. You are part of the earth. Breathe. That's it.
That's gorgeous. Thank you.
We're going to have a couple people read their haikus.
Listen to a trout, hear the river's calm. Feel you are both home.
Oh. Thank you. There's one more. Anyone else want to come up?
Oh, it's your chance to get on the mic.
Live on the internet.
I titled it Trout Fishing. I feel at home too. I am also meant to be. I become at peace.
Okay. Anyone else? No pressure?
No
Okay.
pressure.
That was excellent. Thank you for the haikus. Thank you, Sherry. Does anybody have any questions for Sherry before we move on? In the
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say, like, I'm an agriculture educator and I use C+ a lot, and this is one of the chapters, like I pull some different things from this trout program for trout teaching, so it is really cool.
Amazing. Okay, are there any questions in the chat? Okay, excellent. Let's give.
Are there
any haikus in the chat? Are there?
People on the internet need to get better.
Okay. That's okay. Okay. Excellent. We'll give Sherry another round of applause. So that concludes the presentations for the evening, which also means we're going to say goodbye to our live stream friends. So thank you for everyone who joined online. If you have any questions, you can direct them to Freshwater Conservation Canada or any of the member organizations. We appreciate everyone who was not able to come in person but was able to join online. And yeah, okay. I'm going to end the live stream now. Somehow.
Yeah, I got it.
You can do it?
Yep.
Excellent.